I think they did really well. I think they got back enough value for Hamels, given what kind of pitcher he is and the years of control remaining. They were the one team that could put out there a top-end starter who was not just a rental. And that, to me, demanded getting back more than one elite-level prospect. They got back two guys, or maybe three, who were in the top 100 in all of baseball, as well as a couple of kind of extra arms thrown in as well, guys who could maybe eventually surface as middle relievers. And I think that's a pretty reasonable haul, especially given the fact that most of the teams that had interest in Hamels didn't really have the prospects to put together a better deal than this.
Yeah, in your opinion, Keith, what was the key to this deal? Was there a player in this deal that made the deal stand out to say that made it worth it, that they didn't get their number one or their number two, but this guy made the deal reasonable?
No, I don't think so, because they didn't get Joey Gallo or Nomar Mazara, who were the top two prospects in the Rangers system. And look, obviously, if they'd gotten one of those guys, it would have been an absolute home run. But because the Rangers system is fairly deep, getting three other guys in the Rangers' top 7 or 8 prospects is still a pretty good outcome. I love the long-term upside of Jorge Alfaro, who's the catcher they got, who's actually hurt. He had an ankle injury. It's going to keep him out at least until fall ball. But a catcher with a top-of-the-line throwing arm, rivals any throwing arm anybody in professional baseball, and who has 30-plus homer power potential. He hasn't gotten there yet because he's young and his plate discipline stinks. I mean, he's really got to make some major strides in his approach at the plate. But you're rolling the dice on huge long-term upside. If this guy gets even close to what his ceiling is, you've got an all-star catcher, and that's a position of fairly serious need in the Phillies organization, and just generally a position of scarcity all around baseball.
I asked that question because, Keith, originally when the deal came out, it was, 3 players and 4 players, and then they start to trickle out with more. Jake Thompson got at it, and people really said, all right, well, if he's at it, then this deal looks a lot better. So that deal kind of evolved over the hour that the report came out.
Yes, and it's why I generally don't like responding to trades, reacting to trades at all, until we have a report that we believe is final and confirmed. So I'm often asked, well, when are you going to write your reaction to this? And I say, deal's got to be done. And I bring this up because, of course, we had the whole Carlos Gomez thing where it leaked out, and I'm in the camp that believes that there was an agreement in place, but it leaked out too soon. Most news outlets were reporting it as a done deal, and then it fell through, probably because of something in Carlos Gomez's medicals. But that one was so far along, I'd actually written up a response to it, like an analysis of the deal. And it's just sort of reminded me and everyone else of the reason, it's better to wait. I'd rather wait and be accurate than jump out in front and say, oh, this is a bad deal for the Phillies. Oh, wait, they're getting Jake Thompson back. No, now it's a good deal for the Phillies.
When you look at the deal, Keith, and I know that Ruben may or may not have made the deal, but some people would ask the question, does it look like a deal that Ruben made? And if so, does he use one of his 9 lives this season?
I would be floored and frankly disappointed if the Phillies did not use the change in president as the opportunity to make a change in the general manager chair. I think Ruben Amaro has had more than sufficient chance to show whether he's the right person to lead this Phillies club going forward, whether he's the person to rebuild, and his long-standing resistance to using the analytics that every other club in baseball, even the Tigers now, who were down close to the Phillies in terms of reluctance to use advanced analytics, are now out in the market to build an analytics department. So unless you want to be left further behind, you need to make a change in the general manager chair. And so I don't know who made this deal. I'm going to assume that everybody there was involved to some degree, especially because Andy McPhail had said, and we talked about this, he's been out of the game for a while, so it's not like he knew the prospects himself. But still, the time is now. Now that the trade deadline is passed, it would be the perfect time for them to make a change, even if you have to go with an interim GM for the rest of the season. But this way, by the time you get into September, when other candidates might become available, you can get out in front of it, start the interview process, and really get your pick of the litter of GM candidates.
Keith Law's with us, ESPN Major League Baseball insider. The Phillies make that deal. And I ask that because you look at Andy McPhail, he made that Bedard trade. It was a 5-for-1, and Jason Stark does our show Fridays, and he had said that the Phillies were kind of looking for yesteryear's prices, and teams don't want to make those deals anymore. Did the deal they make, was that a yesteryear deal where they got 6 players for essentially 1? I mean, Diekman is just a bullpen arm.
Well, and the 6th player they got back is Matt Harrison, who sort of arrived in 6 packages with all of the different pieces left over, and you're hoping you can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's a 3-for-1. I understand that there were 6 bodies. It's six bodies coming and 2 bodies going. They got 3 real prospects coming back. In olden days, the yesteryear deals, they get one of those top 2 prospects I mentioned, Gallo or Mazzara. That almost never happens anymore. You kind of need the wrong GM on the other end of the phone to get away with a deal like that. We're seeing fewer and fewer of those prospects even changing hands at this point, because even the lesser GMs, maybe the less respected, less regarded, whatever you want to call them, understand the value of those 6 years of control, particularly the first 3 years of a player's career when he makes nothing. He makes the minimum salary, essentially. And so when it's a guy like a Gallo, like a Mazzara, who might come up and make an impact right away, teams don't want to trade those guys. They shouldn't trade those guys. They're the most valuable commodities in the entire sport. And that's why I'm comfortable saying the Phillies did about as well as they were going to do.
Keith, Alfaro, Nick Williams, who, by the way, had a monster night last night, Jake Thompson, Jared Eichhoff. Of these guys, who's closest for you? Thompson.
I think that he could pitch in a major league rotation next year. Alfaro, of the big 3, including Alfaro, Williams, Thompson, Alfaro is the furthest away because he's not going to play the rest of the season. Before the trade, the Rangers folks had told me they were hoping he'd be ready to play in the Arizona Fall League. Alternative would be to play in the Colombian Winter League, where he's from. He should be ready to play this winter. He needs to play because he needs those at-bats. Williams, kind of in between the two. I don't really love his approach at the plate. I don't think he has great instincts, but he has performed extremely well now in 2 AA environments this year, and I would be shocked if he didn't at least start next year in AAA, whereas Alfaro should probably start next year back at AA with catcher Andrew Knapp, who's playing very well for Reading right now, starting next year at AAA. Give Alfaro more time to develop because he needs to work on that plate discipline and also his receiving. He's a great throwing catcher, but in terms of receiving, framing, game calling, all of that still needs work.
Keith, we've talked many times this year, and the Phillies organization, especially the farm system, has not been a strong suit when we have a discussion. Has that changed? Are they now someone who has some depth and some help there?
It's better. I liked the first 2 picks they made in the draft this year, getting the high upside high school hitter Cornelius Randolph, and then the fairly polished college hitter, but still pretty athletic, in Scott Kingery. They did well in the 3 trades. They got a pretty good bullpen arm piece, potential bullpen arm back from Toronto in the Ben Revere deal. And then Nick Pivetta, I think with a couple little tweaks, has a chance to be a 4th starter or so. People really love his aptitude, his makeup. Stuff is pretty good to at least be a major league starter. You add all of that together, and yes, they're out of the depths. This is no longer a bottom-of-the-barrel farm system. And it also helps that guys like Andrew Knapp, who was essentially off the radar, totally afterthought, coming into the season, has now bounced back, and at the very least looks like he's going to be a decent big league backup catcher, maybe a chance for something more, whereas a year ago, he looked like a complete bust.
Yeah, and you know, obviously we saw Nola finally get the call. He's pitched well. Franco has done really well in his call-up. I know you love
Jay last night, by the way.
What's that?
The play that Franco made last night, I know A.J. Ellis was running, but, you know, for a guy who I had criticized, other scouts had criticized, saying that he just was not going to have the range, the footwork to be able to play third base, it's been better. The hands were good, the arm was always good, but you watched the beginning of that play, he got off his feet quickly to come in and make that play, and I give him a lot of credit for that.
As he steps to the plate right now, by the way, Phillies trail 10-6. You know, Franco, and then I know you love Crawford, and, you know, you wonder if a deal like this helps, I don't want to say rush, but make these guys, you know, who play together and have they gotten any closer to being a team that can not to say contend, but be better than a 100-loss team faster than they thought?
That depends on what they spend for the major league roster, because very little of what we've talked about here, Pivetta from the Nationals, guys for Ben Revere, the whole Hamels trade, none of that should be on the big league roster on opening day of next year. They'll start to trickle into Philadelphia over the course of 2016, but I would not at this point expect any of those guys to have a huge impact on the club next year. They'll debut at some point there, early 2017. I never want to forecast anyone to go full Carlos Correa on the majors. A lot of them are going to scuffle a little bit right away. You're seeing Chris Bryant's going through some growing pains. He was the best prospect of the game coming into the season. So I think you could have a year or two that are really down unless they decide to sort of backstop the major league roster with some decent veterans on short-term deals, 1- and 2-year deals, in free agency or maybe even some opportunistic trades, just to use some of that major league payroll and say, we're going to be a little more competitive, and then acquire those pieces that we can trade. You get the guy, you use him for 4 months, you flip him at the next trade deadline. That's the right approach for this club, and they certainly have the money to do it, but we haven't seen them actually go through a cycle like that, so I only bring it up as a hypothetical rather than saying, yes, I know they're going to do this.
All right, the Phillies, they traded Papelbon. You mentioned Pivetta. They traded Revere. They got 2 arms back in that deal, and Utley is still here. How should the Phillies deal with Utley when he comes back?
They'd be better off trading him. I mean, that was true from the day that he signed the extension. They would have been better off trading him. But you've got multiple variables there, whether ownership will allow it, whether he'll allow it, whether he'll waive the no trade protection that he has. But certainly he has no place on the major league roster in the long term. Now, I say that recognizing that his trade market may be close to zero at this point, given his age, injuries, and recent non-performance. At that point, you don't just release the guy. I'm fine with them giving him at-bats as long as he's not blocking anybody. I bring him up as somebody you should explore trading in the thought that you might get something back for him. It's possible that I'm a little out of date on this, and that window is already closed. And if you're not going to get anything back for him, fine, then scrap what I said. But if he's healthy and looks like he can move around, and hey, maybe he has to move to first base for somebody, but is a useful left-handed bat off the bench, look into it and see if you can find a situation that's agreeable for him, as well as for, obviously, a potential trade partner.
Yeah, we'll see if he is due back. He is in Philadelphia today. He played last night, 3 for 4 in Reading. Looked like he feels better. We'll see what they do. I mean, because they had said Cesar Hernandez is going to play. He's better. But if you want to actually showcase Utley, you got to get him on the field so other teams can see that he's healthy. I guess that's an odd dynamic when you're not a very good team.
Yes, and the problem is if Utley can't play second anymore, if just health-wise he can no longer play second base, well, then what do? Do you play him at first? Do you have him learn, essentially, on the fly to play first? And you have somebody else over at first who also hits left-handed and also is kind of unmovable. You can see what I'm saying, that the pieces don't really fit together all that well. And I do worry that Utley looked bad. He just looked immobile earlier this season. And if he can't play second base anymore, then you're going to have to – so you're going to have to sit one of the big 2 veterans on that side of the infield, because they can't both play at the same time.
Last one for Keith Law here. You work in a front office and you see what's going on with the Phillies. They played much better. They got rid of the manager. Pete Mackinnon has done a good job. Do you get fooled into saying that he's got a shot to be the next guy, or do you have to completely find a new guy, or do you give him an opportunity?
The argument I've made for every situation like this for as long as I've been doing this job is you do not just promote the interim guy without doing a full search outside of the organization. What are the odds that the best candidate for your manager opening happened to be the guy sitting on the other end of the bench at the time that, well, in this case, the other guy quit. Usually I would say that the other guy was fired. He's probably not. It's nothing against Pete Mackinnon, but you have an opportunity to go across all of the minor leagues. Look at every minor league manager currently managing, coaching, whatever. Find a guy with experience, with the specific developmental skills that you're looking for, because this is going to be a young club and they're going to be bringing up a lot of young players. Go and find that guy. Don't waste the opportunity, because teams are – now the trend is to hire guys who've never managed anywhere, and they all stink. Matt Williams is a disaster in Washington. He managed them right out of first place against the Mets last weekend. Don't do that. Go out and do the full search. Find the right guy, even if he's someone no one's heard of, and the fans are going to be disappointed. It doesn't matter. Their opinion doesn't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. Go find the right manager.
Keith Law, at Keith Law on Twitter, Baseball Tonight, and more over at ESPN.com. Always a pleasure, Keith. Thanks so much.
Yep, my pleasure.